Okay. Welcome everyone, and those of you who are still coming in. I'm Erin Ozenbaugh. I'm the Donor Relations Manager at Leadership Austin. I'm a member of the Education Committee for the AFP Greater Austin Chapter, and I'm also a co-chair for the inaugural season of the Values and Skills Institute. I want to quickly intro the Values and Skills Institute. For those of you who are not familiar, it's pretty new. It's a complementary sister program to the larger, more formal education offerings from AFP Austin. Our goal is to make education more accessible in smaller, more intimate groups that allow for more engagement and connection. So that's why we're using Zoom, where folks can directly talk to each other and interact as much as you would or would not like to. If you have an idea for a topic or a speaker for the Institute, you can share that with us. There's a submission form on our website at afpaustin.org. Today's session, which is a conversation between veteran and next generation fundraisers, came to me from volunteer extraordinaire, fundraising priestess, general all-around phenomenal human being, Pam Benson Owens. She told me that she had a specific interest in learning from folks who had been there, done that, and also hearing new ideas from new practitioners. I thought it was a fabulous idea, and I said, I would love to learn those things too. So that's how we got here today. We have 5 fundraisers online. We had a 6th, Jaden Beatty from Austin Groups for the Elderly. She had to drop out at the last minute because of a scheduling conflict. But the other 5 who are here are diverse. They represent both of those 2 perspectives, the veteran perspective and the next generation perspective. One person on the panel began her career in fundraising the same year that another person on the panel retired from her 30-year career. So we have a big swath of voices to hear from today. I just want to quickly tell you how the session is going to progress over the next hour. I think all of us on the panel are feeling like an hour isn't enough time, especially with 5 panelists. So we will move through as quickly as we can, and we will just all have to accept that not everything is going to get touched on today, probably. But you can all connect with each other afterward if you want to continue the conversation. I'm not going to intro each panelist at the beginning. Instead, I'm going to intro each of you as I present questions to you. We will present 1 question to each panelist at the beginning. And then after that, I want to give the panelists to ask questions of each other or to speak on another question that they heard earlier in the presentation if they want to. And then at the end, we will open up the floor to questions from the audience. And you can use the raise hand feature to unmute and ask your question. You can type it in the chat box for everyone, or you can send me a direct message, however you prefer to ask your question. So with that, we're going to get started with the first question, which is for, well, it was for Chris Attal, but it looks like we might have lost Chris again. She's been, that's okay. We'll come back to Chris, she'll be back. She's been having some technical difficulties, so we'll wait for Chris and touch on her when she comes back. So in that case, we'll go.
There she is.
There's Chris. Chris is back.
Oh, you're muted.
On mute.
So get her unmuted.
I keep getting kicked off of the internet. I'm so sorry.
That's okay, Chris. We'll start with you and hope that we can keep you with us long enough to get an answer out of you. Chris received her degree from UT Austin in Spanish and secondary education. She served on multiple boards of directors, including as president of the Junior League of Austin before joining the staff at Seton in 1990. Her career at Seton had many iterations, beginning at a clinic in East Austin and ultimately supporting a $50 million capital campaign that created the Dell Seton Medical Center before she retired last year. Chris and her husband Ronnie are the proud parents of 3 grown children and will celebrate their 53rd wedding anniversary next month. I think I got all of that right.
Oh.
We're losing her again. All right, I'm not going to pitch the question until I see her face again. So we'll come back to Chris, and I want to go to Brett now. I have a few questions that touch on the theme of lived experience versus formal training in the field. For most of us who have been practicing for a while, there was no formal education for fundraisers. There was no fundraising school when we got our start, so everyone kind of came to the field from a different place. I should note that no one on the panel today, like most of us in the audience, I would guess, has a formal education background that is specifically fundraising related. Brett has been a professional singer for 35 years. He began working in nonprofits in 1998 and got his first fundraising job in 2002. And since 2017, he has served as the Senior Director of Philanthropy at Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas. So Brett, my question to you, you studied vocal performance at UT and spent the early part of your career in development at arts organizations. And many fundraisers, I think, would say that they got similar starts in the field because of their passion for the program. Do you have advice for people who are entering the field because they want to support a mission, but might not have a lot of fundraising specific experience?
Thanks for the question, and thank you all for making time in your very busy schedules. As she said, I'm Brett Barnes. I use the pronouns he, him, his. Yeah, I thought I would be traveling the world right now, singing opera on every famous stage, and not, as my mother would put it when she was alive, begging for money. And I tried, though, as much as I could to tell her I don't beg for money. There's a strategy and there's a really detailed process that never kind of sunk in. But, you know, the thing that was important to me was when, as a singer, I was traveling so much and I just got tired of living out of a suitcase. So I thought, what could I do and what skills do I currently have that I could put to use maybe in a career that was not singing. But I knew I still wanted to be involved in the arts because the arts, I think, are essential to us as a culture. So I started working at the opera company. I would help with their grants. I, of course, attended donor events. I was singing with Conspirare, a professional choir here in town. They got a grant to hire somebody dedicated to do fundraising. They asked me if I'd be interested in that position since I knew a lot of rich opera donors. So that's sort of how it all started down that path. And I found out that I really did like what we all do, is connecting people that have a passion for something with an organization that we all work with or know of. And that's what gives me great joy in what I get to do every day. I did get a mentor. The minute I kind of decided I was going to go into fundraising, I got a mentor. I got into AFP. I started looking for opportunities to learn because I think just natural skills can take you to some place. But again, you are going to need some tried and true methods to advance your mission that you're very passionate about. So that's the thing that I feel is important, is I have to be passionate about the mission no matter where I go. And the arts was clearly a place that I wanted to start out at.
I love your mother's view on what you do. When I graduated from college and told my dad what I was going to do for a living, he said, "Why did I just pay for 4 years of school? You knew how to ask for money before you left the house." So I guess maybe we should get all of our parents in the room sometime and see what their perspectives are on what we do. So no formal training, you got a mentor, you got involved in the resources that were available to you. I think you're the only person on the panel today who is credentialed. You have a CFRM and a CFRE. Anne and Chris, and Kenya, I don't know about you, but I didn't see them in your bios, so I didn't think you had the credentials.
I do have it.
Okay, so Chris also has it. So Brett, and then Chris, if you'd like to add anything, what do you think, what motivated you to get the credentials, and what value do you think they have or have not added to your career?
It's interesting because one of my incredible colleagues is sitting, and I can see her face, and we've talked about this numerous times. You know, for me, it was just a personal thing. If I'm going to spend the time and energy, I want to do it at the very best and highest level. And I felt it was important to add validity to our profession. And oftentimes that comes with people seeing that you've invested the time in getting the alphabet soup behind your name. I was fortunate with the CFRM that AFP was partnering with the Austin Community Foundation and bringing in the Lilly School to Austin. So I didn't have to go anywhere, and I got to do those courses here in Austin. But the CFRE was certainly a time and a commitment to do that. And you have to renew those, and you have to keep that up. But to me, it felt very important. And now as I look around, not that I'm looking to leave Planned Parenthood, it just in case anybody else, any of my other colleagues are out there. You see that more is like CFRE is either preferred or CFRE required. So I think it's a credential that more people are valuing. Chris?
Well, and I'm like you, Brett. I never really had started out thinking I'd ever be a fundraiser or philanthropic officer. Just kind of fell into it, doing volunteer work. I was a stay-at-home mom when my kids were young. And I did just a ton of board work and community work, but it was really fortunate to have the opportunity to learn early on that it's a partnership. I can remember one of the most pivotal moments. I remember as a volunteer going in to raise money for a particular event and being terrified and walking into this person's office, and we sat and had a conversation about it. And before I left, he said, "I want to thank you." And I went, "Thank me for what?" And he basically said, "I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this and to make a difference." And I was just blown away because I was so green and so naive. And that was just an awakening for me. And realize that it's all about, again, the relationships.
Oh, you're muted.
Goodness.
Okay.
I have to thank my colleague Taylor for rescuing me, by the way. At any rate, just having the opportunity, being with the Seton Fund, to our director at that time was really encouraging everybody to get the credential because of all the reasons you mentioned. I think it does give us credibility, and it does give us a more professional aspect to what we're doing. So was able to do it through Seton, and I terrified the whole way because I've been out of school a long time and had never really done a test online. So it was really scary for me, but I was really glad I did it.
One of the things, if I could just 2 seconds, one of the things that I often have asked when either looking at jobs or interviewing is, what is your investment in professional development? And I think as a young professional going out and looking for jobs, or if you're looking to change, that's definitely a question I would ask. And would you support my efforts to become a CFRE? Because it's not a cheap endeavor. I mean, it's $700 plus if you want to do a review course. And, so I think asking those questions of how much do you want to invest in me is important.
Thank you. I love that. All right, Chris, we're going to try it again with you for your question. I'd like to chat with you a little bit about multi-generational workforces and working across generation. This question actually came from someone who registered for the session today. We had a space to pre-pitch questions, and this was from, I don't know who submitted it, but thank you if you're on the call. People are waiting longer to retire and working well past the traditional retirement age of 55. And it's created the new phenomenon of a multi-generational workforce. There are now 4 distinct generations present, each with their own preferences of how to communicate, what to communicate, what they value, how they operate. So from a fundraising perspective, how do funders hear the right message when it's coming from people of different generations? And maybe even how do you navigate that in your organization? Because people across generation might actually be expressing your mission in slightly different ways based on what generation they're in.
I noticed that much later in my work, donors were more interested in ROI. They wanted to know more about return on investment. So the younger, I think, and I don't want to generalize, but it seems to me the donors now who are probably younger and newer to their companies are looking at what return they're going to get for their money. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, but they really want to see results and they want to see metrics. And I don't remember that when I first started out, doing fund development. It was more all about the mission and about the kind of the heart. And I'm not saying that that's not happening now as well, but I think there's a further expectation with this generation of philanthropic leaders to really want to have documented data on the differences that you're making with your program. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that.
How did that new expectation affect how you were doing your work? I think, like, from my experience, it makes me work much more closely with the program managers. And some of them have said, you know, I'm not a fundraiser. And I'm saying, but you are. How did that change how you worked as a fundraiser?
I think you really have to have a lot more closer relationship with the people in your organization that may or may not be in the fundraising part of it, because the program people that you work with, it's really important. And it's difficult for them to stop what they're doing and work with you on this, but you have to impress on them that what you're trying to do is tell their story. And I was always so proud to be the one that was able to go out and tell the story of the wonderful things that were happening at this new teaching hospital. But it does require more work on behalf of the people that do keep the data, to have a regular sit down time with me to catch me up on what's happening. I know Cecilia Blanford, I noticed, is on the line, and she was one of our grants writers. And just being able to translate what the program is doing into those data points is very difficult, and it's time consuming. So I think you have to have a really good relationship with your people that are tracking those kinds of things within the organization at large.
And you unmuted yourself. Did you have something to add?
No, I would concur. I think sometimes the program people need, that team bond there of us telling their story and really needing to know the numbers better for the donors is definitely something that's changed, over the years.
Okay, thank you. I want to talk to one of the next generation fundraisers on the call now, Ian Tuske. Ian is also one of two panelists who are newer to Austin. And I think it's important to, talk about who is and isn't from here, because that definitely colors your experience and your perspective. I believe Ian arrived in Austin around 2015, accurate? He earned a master's in music at Yale and a PhD from the Butler School of Music at UT Austin. And he's currently serving as the Director of Development for University Priorities at UT Austin. Ian, similar to Brett, Brett was not recent, but you made the switch from the program delivery side of your passion, which is guitar.
That was recent.
Okay. Sorry, Brett. It was guitar instruction and performance. And now you're on the fundraising side. And you are beginning to advance in that career. Having the perspective from both sides of the house, the program delivery and now fundraising, can you speak to what you see development as getting right, and maybe what are we sort of getting wrong that we could improve on?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of it, and thank you to everyone who's joining us. Yeah, no, that's a great question, and a kind of a good segue from where the last comments sort of left off. I think it's been helpful for me to sort of understand, having been on the programming side, understand just, those are the staff members that are on the front lines, so to speak, working, directly with the communities that the organization is working with and for, versus now being on the other side of that. And I think one thing I always try to keep in mind is not to ask the programming staff to do something that I can do. So making sure that when I am coming to them, asking for information, or even asking them sometimes to join me in a meeting with the donor, to make sure that it's very clear why I'm coming to them, that we're going to be very efficient, so that we can use, as little of their time in this process so that they can maximize, really carrying out the mission of the organization. And that's something I've sort of tried to keep in mind from when I first started fundraising is, that's we need to make sure as fundraisers that we're maximizing everything in our tool belt before we start bringing in, programming staff, certainly to the cultivation process. But then also when we do go to them and ask for the numbers, being very clear about what we need and why, and giving them a long timeline, and just approaching it, sensitively, because it's I think it's an important thing. And then the other thing that it's sort of given me perspective on is, having been a programmer and done donor work in the programming role, sometimes I felt like, am I doing the right things that the donor is going to want to give to, right? And I that's not, not the correct mindset. And I always try to remind staff members that I work with now that, they'll say things like that to me sometimes, and I always remind them and say, no, you guys are, you're the experts in this. The donor has interest and a passion, and maybe has, maybe even some experience, but you're the one day to day, carrying this work out. I don't need you to change a thing that you're doing. I just need to know a little bit more information about X, Y, or Z. And so just that, and that kind of takes the pressure, I think, off of them sometimes, where I've experienced where, they sometimes think, oh, it's a donor, and it's just, that's not part of, we forget sometimes that's not a part of their everyday experience like it is for us. So those are the things that kind of come to mind.
Have you gotten much pushback? Did you walk into a culture where that was the standard, that the programs drove, defined what programs were going to be worked on? I know in my past, I've had donors kind of try to drive the train and say, I would like to give you money for this program, please do it. Do you feel like you've got a lot of power in your position now to say, no, our programmers are going to define the projects that we're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, we sort of internally use the word, we call donors our partners, and so inherent in that sort of terminology is that, they're partnering with us in a philanthropic capacity. That doesn't mean they're driving the bus in any way. And I think that's where, coming to these conversations with donors from the very first day, with transparency about our role, and about how they can participate is important. And it's not to diminish anything. It's just to be clear about, what the needs are. And I think our role is often, what are the needs of the communities we're working with, and what are the passions of the donor, and how do those intersect? And if they don't intersect, that's okay. Maybe that's an uncomfortable conversation, but it's something, I think if you've been clear and transparent and diplomatic from the first day, that then puts you on a good trajectory to continue being clear and transparent and diplomatic going forward.
I love that. Thank you. And I think that's probably a good example of the new changes and the way that new practitioners are changing the field, because I don't think that was necessarily always the standard. So thank you. And thank you for practicing in that way. I'll move to Nikenya Wilson, who is one of our other next generation fundraisers. Nikenya has a bachelor's in communication from UT and a master's in peace studies and conflict resolution from Abilene Christian. And I just have to tell you that I think peace studies sounds like something that should be a prerequisite for any fundraiser ever. I think that has equipped you for all of life. She served most recently as the executive director of Black Mamas ATX, before joining Houston Tillotson University as the vice president of institutional advancement. Nikenya, if you can, I'd like for you to reflect on some of the questions I'd asked earlier, specifically to Brett and Ian. You started a career in service to college-bound young people 20 years ago as a resident advisor at UT. And throughout your career, you've kind of gone all over the primary and secondary education system, as well as a range of roles in the child advocacy realm. And I'd like to know how your experience on the program delivery side, again, is influencing your work now.
Absolutely. So I think, for me, what I found to be one of, let me preface with saying, I have a husband who's a salesperson, right? Like straight sales. And we were recently in a conversation about the difference between direct sales and fundraising. And for me, the biggest difference being that I get to sell something that I am passionate about and that I care about. And so it makes all the difference. Not to say that the backing point isn't great or whatever service you're selling, but when I am connected to mission, then it's really not a sale, right? It's getting people to love it the way that I love it. And so regardless of the organization or even the role that I've had in various organizations, I'm always selling mission. And I'm always asking for some type of time, talent, or treasure investment, whether it be through volunteerism or having people to advocate on behalf of the organization. So to me, the shift to direct fundraising, it's just, changing the channel just a little bit, but it's still the same. Does that answer your question, Erin?
Yeah, of course. And similar to the question to Ian, what are your reflections on fundraising, on how we're doing? Is there, are you seeing big room for improvement anywhere?
I've taken that non-traditional route, and especially my current role used to tell us, and we're in a unique time as fundraisers, right? There's COVID, there's this heightened awareness around disproportionality, around inequities and issues of social justice. And I think I would want to talk about what we're doing right. We're having more conversations about how to involve everyone in philanthropy and how we may have or have not been gatekeepers in the past. And I think the opportunity there is to continue to push and to investigate and to think about how to make the most of people's money, honestly, in a way that has the biggest impact. And, I was thinking about the question that she asked Chris a while back, and I think some other people responded around like getting those credentials. I think continuing to have conversations about how that's like potentially a gatekeeping, mechanism for people to get into fundraising and how it's cost prohibitive. And in some cases, the ability to be able to do that comes from a place of privilege. And I think that it's maybe an awkward conversation. It's not the first thing you would want to talk about, but it's real, right? And I'm hoping that we continue to see value in a hybrid of having the nuts and bolts of it, but also people who are connected to community and causes that know where the biggest bang for your buck is, to do what it is that our donors are wanting it to do.
Yeah, the old question of lived experience versus formal education, and how do we weight each of them? Okay, good. Thank you. For everyone taking notes, I'm hearing efficiency, impact, and equity. I think those are our 3 takeaways so far today. Finally, I want to go to Anne, our 5th panelist, Anne Jerome. She's the other non-native Texan on the Panhandle, but Anne, I know you got here as quickly as you could. Anne began her roles at a leadership level for local and national nonprofits in 1990. Including with Goodwill, Ronald McDonald House Charities, and the American Heart Association. She has a master's in sociology from the University of Memphis, where she was also a member of the racquetball team, which I will love forever. She is now in what she calls the 3rd phase of her career as the Central Region Philanthropy Manager for the Animal Legal Defense Fund. And can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by the 3rd phase of your career? And I think you texted me and said it's actually 4 phases.
4. Yeah.
So, what are the phases?
Yeah. So technically it's the 4th phase, and it's because I started in the program world too. I started out as a program director right out of college with my master's degree with Goodwill in Omaha, Nebraska. And so I was in the program world for about 4 years. And when we were moving to Kansas City, well, let me just back up. When I was 19, I was very enamored with Faye Waddleton from Planned Parenthood, who was the big head of Planned Parenthood. And I was in college, and that was when I first realized that this could be a career. You could be the head of a nonprofit organization. So When I was 19, I said that by the time I was 35, I wanted to be an executive director. So when I got my first job at Goodwill, I actually told the CEO that was my goal. So he became a mentor immediately. He thought that was chutzpah, and so I was in the program world for 4 years. We go to move to Kansas City, and I talked to Frank, the CEO, and said, what do I do now? Like what am I looking for now for this career path? And he said, you have to do development. You have to get into fundraising. To be a good executive director, you put them both together. So then I actually was at the MS Society, did the MS 150 bike tour coordinator job for a while, and then a couple of other things, and was in that world. So that's my second phase, was being the development director, right? And so I was in that world for about 7 years or so, and then was able to make the leap in 2001 to the Ronald McDonald House Charities as the executive director, CEO in Kansas City. And so I was in the CEO executive director role for about 20 years. So that's the third phase. Was the 20 years where I, was executive director at the American Heart Association here, and then most recently at Explore Austin. So kind of went, bigger national and then back local, and now I'm national. But in my fourth phase, like I had always wondered, even when I became the CEO of Ronald McDonald House when I was 36. So I missed my goal by technically 3 months. However, and one of your questions you asked me was about balance. However, I gave myself credit because I had a baby. And so when I became the CEO at 36 at Ronald McDonald House, I had a 14-year-old and an 11-month-old. And so it was kind of crazy time, at that point to take on like such a big role. And we went immediately into a capital campaign, and, it was awesome. But so that was that third phase. But I remember when I got that job, I was like, oh my gosh, I finally got the job I've always worked for. Now what? What do I, what's going to be that next thing? So I managed to, eke out the executive director, CEO route for, 20 years. And then in around the time that Chris, retired or left, Seton, or, I had left Explore Austin and was planning to take 2020 off and to do consulting or kind of figure out what is it that you do after have been an executive director for a long time, and really knew that wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. I had to, that pressure, unbeknownst to me, COVID. I mean, I had no idea that when I left, that the world was going to go on to pause too. But now I say I'm in my fourth phase because I work a remote position with the Animal Legal Defense Fund. I'm back, pure fundraising, major gifts, have a portfolio, have way more flexibility, have nobody reporting to me. And I have worked with Aaron and Jenny Jensen on here. So maybe that's a good thing, or maybe I was a good boss to have, I don't know. But it's just a completely new phase. Like I had no idea that how much I would like not being in charge, and, and finding a new thing for this, and making way. I mean, stepping out of the way for the next generation, like I know what that was like. And I told you about Frank McGree from Omaha, the Goodwill there, and another mentor of mine, Sherry from Kansas City Free Health Clinic. They both literally just retired like 3 years ago. I'm 56 years old, and I was just like, when I was moving on, I was like, where the heck was I going to go? I mean, like I couldn't stay in my same organizations. You have to move, you have to figure out, because these two people didn't retire till they were like 65, like what I don't know what I'd have been doing if I was still there. But I mean, like, so trying to make room and help grow, that next generation, and, open up some seats, so. that was my fourth. Did I answer your question? My fourth.
Yeah, and so hearing your story and other stories that I've heard recently from other people, it sounds like there is really a gap for what happens toward the end and then after your career has ended, right? Because nobody wants to just stop completely. What does that
Right.
transition look like? What happens after?
Yeah,
So-
yeah. A few years ago, of course, when Sheryl Sandberg's book Lean In came in, I was at the Ronald McDonald House at the time. Jan Gunter and Missy Strittmatter, we were all there working together. And I remember saying, yeah, I think I'm going to write the book called Lean Out. And it's going to be for women that are like 48 and over, because you do need that. You have these role models for like, how do you get to be a CEO? I can see it and be it. But it's like, okay, like, how do you see it and be it when you're still relevant? You have skills, you have, things to offer, but maybe you don't want to be in the thick of the pack, and so, but that's still a valid point, in life too. So I feel like, oh, I kind of accidentally, but on purpose, figured out the fourth phase for me. So
Taylor Kidd, who's the chair of the education committee, I feel like I hear a topic for programming later this year for us to have conversations about. So Anne, you touched on it a little bit, maintaining a work-life balance. I know that's a popular, a frequently asked question. And from my perspective, having worked for you before, I feel like you really mastered it. I feel like you were very present for your family while also being present at work. Do you have any tricks? Do you have any wisdom to share? What worked? What absolutely did not work?
Yeah. Oh, well, let's see. You got the text message, so the real stuff. I think that the thing about balance is, when you're in the trenches, or sometimes you don't feel like there's balance, like it doesn't, you don't get to, sometimes you're just not present enough to know, oh yeah, I'm juggling all this really well, because it always feels like something's falling over on one side or the other. So the whole, idea of balance is, a little bit shaky, even for me. I felt like what worked for me, especially when I was really like, in true career, mode, was definitely taking care of myself. My husband used to say, I have a good partner, so I'm going to throw that out there, right? Like Brad is awesome. And he always felt my career was important too, which I think is good. I mean, that's very helpful for me. He put that was priority for him too. And like I said, I had a child the whole time. Like I had a child in college. And so I always had that little person that helped me be balanced. I feel like if I wouldn't have had him so young, I might not have ever had kids. I might have just been all career all the time. So having, being, really having to force myself to recognize, you need to shut down at, a decent time and get home and have dinner, and daycare is going to close and you're screeching in there, paying late fees. I mean, you do that. But I feel like, having a life outside of work, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's working out and doing rogue, running. I know, Erin, you do that. Having a life outside of work is really key, whatever that is, because, that's going to help you, prioritize yourself. I can say easy things too, like it's not going to be popular maybe, but I don't drink. And like a lot of people might not even realize that about me. I am from New Orleans, and I can be loud and ridiculous without it, but I don't drink, and I work out, and I've always put that as a priority. I mean, I was, like you said, a college athlete. It's always been something that was important to me from a perspective of stress relief too, like running and thinking and working things out in my head. But, eating right. I mean, just, it's some of the basics, too, getting sleep. There are times when you're not getting a lot of sleep, but it definitely would catch up with me. And I think that was when you say like, what didn't work? Well, just sometimes you're just working so much, or I was working so late and then getting up so early and trying to be, get kids to school and stuff like that, that there were times when, what wasn't working for me was when I was, not taking a step back and saying, okay, time out. I have called in sick, for mental health days. I might not have said that. I just, but that was what I was doing. There were, you have to take care of yourself, and so that you can be better. I was always working with a team. You're always, it is you, whether you're at the top of the hierarchy or, in a more supportive role, you're always with a team and people are relying on you. So whether it was family or work or volunteer work or whatever, it's really, I think pacing yourself is, and figuring out what pace works for you. And also, I'll say one more thing. Like I knew when I was 36 and I had this 14-year-old and this, 1-year-old and a new big job, I knew that this was not going to be easy, and that I was going to just really kind of go for it and understand that it was what I had worked for, and I was going to push myself, and get through it, that it wouldn't always be like this. And it isn't always like that. But Brad and I made that decision. We knew that that was not going to be easy for us as a family or for me as a, individual. And so really kind of gearing yourself up for it. Being aware, being self-aware is important.
Yeah. I would say one of the changes that is for sure happening in the industry and culture wide is that we don't use quotations for sick when we're talking about mental health anymore. Like that is a legitimate, we're paying more attention to that. So I think that's a good change that we've been making. Could I take that same question about work-life balance and open it up to the rest of the panel? Do you have anything to add? Good tricks that failed? Anything to speak on there?
Having a retired husband who loves to cook is the best.
Yeah, definitely.
Good. Okay.
And I don't think this is coincidental, but you asked the question of Ann, and then Chris kind of chimed in, and then now the third woman on the panel chimed in. And I think originally we were going to have a conversation or talk a little bit about the shift in fundraisers and women versus men. And I think that's, kind of an unspoken extra thing that we don't always talk about, is that, traditionally the role of women, and we have families, we have children, it's even more imperative for us to figure out what that balance looks like. And it's not always easy, to Ann's point, if you have a partner, ideally, you could split it down the middle or they could pick up the slack, but society still pushes us to be, the primary caretakers. And so for me, I have to constantly recenter myself. And I can't always measure my success against what other people are doing, and how many hours a week they're working, or how many times they're, doing things in the evenings and on the weekends. And if I'm not doing it, then, I'm not being shown up as my best, version of my professional self. I've been reflecting a lot just in the last 24 hours around Simone Biles pulling out of the Olympics. And, it just resonated so deeply with me, being able to say, I'm worth more than what people see as my output, and knowing when to draw some boundaries. And unfortunately, just in the workforce in general, even with COVID, those are not necessarily the same choices that men are having to make that women are having to make. And so I think also continuing in the equity discussion to talk about how it looks different, how we can support and empower our colleagues and those that we work for and with, so that women don't feel like they're pushed out of the industries that we're working in.
Yeah. I think that's, really valid. One of the things that Aaron, I had written down, and I was like, I don't know if I like the way this sounds when it comes out, but you said one of my strategies, and what was an approach, that I had taken. Well, one of it was to become an executive director or a CEO, to really set the tone, right? Like I knew that, I was watching people, but also I could set the tone. I mean, I don't know, she's staying off camera, but, hopefully, like people who worked for me in those years that I was places, I helped them see that, okay, I'm going to leave, I got to go pick up my kid, or we've got soccer or whatever, like you do the same thing. Like it doesn't, and so I think that was important too. I think the more that, I didn't always make it look easy either. I don't think, like there was like, whoa, something's happening, but, but that gave everyone else the breath to go, oh, haha, like she's laughing at herself because this is not going right or something. But I feel like that was one of my approaches too, quite honestly. It was like, I wanted to be in leadership because I felt like, oh, I could help set the tone. I can change the tone. I can, give people that space that maybe you might not have if with a different type of boss or leader.
I'm so glad you said that. I have no fear of that sounding wrong. That was perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you were a wonderful boss. I want to, in the interest of time, open up to questions from the floor. I want to make sure that everyone who's on the call has the opportunity to ask anything of the panel that they'd like, if you have an interest. If someone does want to ask a question, just do the raise hand or pop your question in the chat. I haven't seen anything come across yet, but I want to make sure that folks can do that if they want. And while we're waiting for those to come through, I haven't seen any come through yet. Panelists, do any of you have questions for one another? Is there something you want to learn from one of your peers on the call now?
I'd be curious to hear from what it's like for the veteran fundraisers to go from frontline fundraising where no one's reporting to you to a leadership role where you're still doing frontline fundraising and also leading and empowering a team, and how you balance that.
I, for one, had no ambition to be in a leadership role when I started. I mean, even up until the end, really, my first love was to be on the front lines and to do major gifts. And so the way things developed, I ended up having some folks that did report to me. And it was just not my favorite thing to do. I have to admit it. I mean, I love the people I work with and I love supporting them. And I think what you said is so key, being able to support what they're doing and their life, their home life and everything else. That part I loved. What I didn't like was the mechanics of it. Having to do interviews and reviews and the technical stuff. So that was not something that I ever aspired to. And I did feel like it took away from my time to be out talking to donors and being with donors. But that's just a very personal thing. And it may just be that I'm not a particularly ambitious person. I just loved doing what I was doing, but the other things needed to be done. So I'm not sure I have anything to add on that score, but I do think it's difficult to balance it because it does take away from your time with your donors and your time being able to be out there to have to do all that, the administrative stuff that I just frankly was not good at it. So it was fun to hear Anne talk about the fact that she saw that as a positive to be able to support people. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think that, I think that, and Brett, you need to chime in too. I'll keep mine short, but I think that you have to really understand that when you go into like a more management or that leadership role, there's you have to be able to almost compartmentalize, how you approach your job and your day, and your week and your month and your year, because you have a lot of administrative tasks that you have to do, that you're thinking of, like either people above you, CEOs, COOs, but then the board and then your committees. And, there's always, I even had to-do lists that people have copied over the years, just the way I would do my to-do list weekly. And it was very compartmentalized out, and I think that's the piece that I thought I was good at, but I don't miss having to do that, think like keeping all the balls going, like Chris, you have your donors and what you're trying to do, but also then corporate sponsors, but then also how am I supporting so-and-so, and what they're doing and helping them with strategies. And then, there's performance reviews due or something, you have to, be prepared for that. And also being just a supervisor and manager, too, when the things aren't going well, or when someone is having struggles, or, there's a performance thing, being the one to time out, like we need to have a more serious talk. It's, you're trying to be supportive, but also there is a goal. So I think you're navigating a lot when you get into that space, but it's a great space to be in too, especially if you have good EQ and, or,
I think you have to, oftentimes the skill sets are not, as you said, are not aligned. I had a boss that said, Brett, your biggest strength is that you're a people pleaser, and which is great for donors. And, but it's not great when you're having to manage staff, because not all staff, you can't have everybody like you. And there's a difference between being liked and being respected, because, not everybody, will like you, but they will respect the decisions you make as long as you are doing it in the right way. And that was, I remember her saying that to me, and this was part of a 360 sort of evaluation, and all of the executive leadership staff at the organization I was with went through this. And I mean, I remember sitting in my bedroom on a Saturday, just like, what? There are people, I can't let, everybody has to like me. Oh my God, so it's just something that you have to learn. I also, I think it's the hardest and probably the least pleasant part of my job, even though, like Chris said, I love my coworkers. I love my donors too, but you have to just set aside time. And look at the job description. If you're looking at applying for a job or making that shift from full-time fundraiser to now having a leadership role or having a management position, look at that job. And I would ask those questions like, what is the time, what can you give me a breakdown of what you think the time commitment is in each of these? If I'm going to manage a portfolio of 50 people and manage a staff of 4 and do board work and do, can you help me understand how you see that playing out? And I think, again, not being afraid to ask those questions and being part of it. I'll just add one other thing. When I went through Leadership Austin, and we had made the connection that many of us have been through either one of the classes of Leadership Austin, we used to do these fireside chats at the end of our class. And Pat Hayes, who many of you don't know because she left Austin, or she still is here part-time, but yeah, I know Chris, Pat was a guru in just everything she did. And, her advice was, when you're looking to change a job, you really should look at it like 60% you could do in your sleep. That it is not going to, and 30% is going to push you. But with your training, with getting the right mentor, you're going to not, and 10% should scare the hell out of you. And you have no idea what, but you will learn. And that's just been something, as I've sort of looked at my trajectory and just applying that 60-30-10 rule of like, okay, yeah, 60% I can do this in my sleep. I just, and so that's just something I think that we have to look at as you're advancing in your career.
Until you're in your fourth phase of your career now.
Right.
And
Then
you're
you
like,
better have it down. Yeah.
yeah, then you're like, well, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Ian, thank you for the question. It's great.
Yeah.
We had one question come in from the audience, from Michelle, to Nikenya. Nikenya, in 2 minutes, can you answer what the biggest challenges that you've had to adapt to or find solutions for in your new role at Houston Tillotson?
So I think from my perspective, one of the things that coming into a higher education space at a HBCU, we are and have been around for 146 years. So clearly there's resilience and there's some magic to what we do at Houston Tillotson. But I think that despite that long legacy, we still have a lot of people who don't understand what we do or maybe don't value it. And so being able to tell that story in a way that resonates is, I wouldn't say a challenge, but it's an opportunity. I also think that we oftentimes run up against people who are interested in engaging, kind of like what we talked about earlier, and they want to tell you how they want to engage. And when we have staff and faculty that are literally doing the work of 3 people for, you know, pay that is not comparable to the cost of living of Austin, and then they, you know, there's an offer of a sponsorship or, you know, funding for a project, but that then is going to require a lot of extra lift for people who don't have capacity. How do you have conversations about giving that is going to really move the needle and not further burden people who have a lot on their plate? Does that make sense? So those are some things I'm, you know, and my director of development, she's on the call, Paige Kelly. So we're constantly in this push and pull of me kind of pushing the envelope, and when I'm having conversations of restricted versus unrestricted, you know, and what that looks like for the university and for our students.
We're going to give you about a year to master that solution, and then we'll invite you back next summer to tell everyone what the answer was. Thank you. Okay, in the interest of time, we've got 1 minute left. I'm going to do a quick wrap up. First of all, just a humongous thank you to the panelists who were on the call for donating or volunteering your time today. I have the utmost respect for every one of you. I think you're all incredible at what you do. I think you're all incredible human beings, and I'm glad and grateful to be practicing with you in this community. So thank you for being here and for teaching us things. A big theme of today's session was mentorship and learning from one another. I wanted to let everyone on the call know that the AFP Greater Austin chapter has applications open for the fall cohort of the member matching program. It is not a traditional mentorship program in that the expectation is that learning will go both ways. But if you would like to be matched with another member, those applications are due August 9th. You do not have to be a member of AFP to participate in the program. And you can find out more about member matching at afpaustin.org. If you do want to become a member of AFP Austin, there are scholarships available. And the deadline to apply for a scholarship is July 31st, which I believe is this Saturday. You can also find that information on the website. And then I have to give a quick pitch to the AFP Austin one-day conference. It's August 27th. For those of you who are CFREs or are interested in taking the CFRE exam, I believe there are up to 11 credits available through the one-day conference for CFRE certification. All of it's on afpaustin.org. I appreciate the panelists. I appreciate everyone who came to learn, and I look forward to seeing you both online and in person again soon. Thanks, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
thanks, Aaron. Great
All right,
job.
thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Bye.